Living in St. Petersburg, Florida in the year 2025, or if you're thinking about moving here, it's a city that has beautiful beaches, a vibrant hipster vibe. It's a safe city compared to other American cities. There's a lot of great reasons why you would want to move to St. Petersburg, but there's also some negative aspects of the city, some negative aspects that many of the realtors simply won't talk about. On today's video, I'm going to tell you all the great things about living in St. Petersburg, but we're also going to talk about a few things about living here that you should definitely know that most realtors probably won't tell you. Now, living in St. Petersburg today is something that I would actually recommend. If we were making this video many years ago, the answer would have been a redundant no, because St. Petersburg has improved tremendously. It is now, by homicide rate, one of the safest large cities in Florida, and compared to other large cities across the country, leaps and bounds ahead. So things in St. Petersburg, Florida are looking bright and beautiful. But we have to start off with one of the negative things. It's actually a positive. St. Petersburg, Florida, geographically is surrounded by water, and that's where it gets its tropical beach vibes from. That's where it gets its nightlife from. That's where it gets all of the great aspects that have contributed to St. Pete becoming a great city. But unfortunately, being in the Gulf of Mexico, St. Petersburg is a city that has always been at risk of hurricanes. And it's been incredibly lucky over the decades. But as of recently, a hurricane did make landfall here. Many people thought it was just simply impossible or it would never happen, but it did. And despite the destruction along the coastline being crazy, it's only a fraction of what could have happened here. One hurricane made landfall in Sarasota, the other hurricane edged along the coast. Both of them brought storm surge, flooding, and destruction, wind and storm surge to the St. Petersburg area, reminding people that this area is at risk. And with the perfect storm, as they call it, it is always possible that one day a super hurricane, Category 5, enters Tampa Bay, and St. Petersburg, Florida is one of those cities that has always been geographically at risk. It's been awfully lucky, but let's talk a little bit about the effects. And before I talk about the effects, I want to show you how beautiful this coastline was before the hurricane. Some of the clearest water, most incredible beach vibes. Hopefully, St. Petersburg and its coastline can return to what it was before. A beautiful place that me and my wife loved, and we anxiously await for this area to recover to what it was before. But as of right now, this is what the coastline looks like. In 2024, Hurricane Milton and Helene affected the coastline, sucking out the water and also bringing in a storm surge that flooded the area around the Skyway Bridge with 4 to 5 feet of water over the roads. That storm surge also worked its way into the cities and neighborhoods of St. Petersburg, particularly along the coastline. While wind damages were minimal, storm surge flooding flooded entire coastal neighborhoods, and this is what many neighborhoods in St. Petersburg look like in this day. Entire coastal communities where people lost everything of value inside their homes. A 4-foot storm surge flooded the interior of people's properties, destroying everything in its path. New construction going into St. Petersburg, Florida has higher elevation. It's well built here. Like you can see, these houses are 2 stories, concrete block. If you're buying a structure like this, chances are you're in good condition in case a bad situation were ever to happen. But if you're buying an older historic home that's been here for many years, chances are the elevation and the building code will not withstand hurricane damage. And insurance has become a huge topic in Florida as well, with people's homeowners insurance hitting ridiculous levels along coastline communities. Chances are, if you're buying a property in St. Petersburg, I would definitely recommend a newer construction up to newer building codes. The problem is that most of Pinellas County is urban, and it's been urban and completely filled in for decades. It's completely wrapped around the Tampa metro area. It's an urbanized area. It's an older urbanized area, which means most of the houses in St. Petersburg are older. They're not up to building codes. For many decades, they never had the impacts of hurricanes to build like if they were going to have a hurricane. So unless you're buying newer construction, there's a lot of risk of buying real estate in St. Petersburg. And the good thing is that the real estate market here hasn't been ignorant of that fact. Real estate on the islands here can be found for less than $500,000, or at least definitely in the $500,000 range for older properties, the entry level prices, which means that people here did understand that one day this could happen, and you didn't have a bubble of real estate appreciation that didn't reflect the risk. The problem now is moving forward, the cost of insurance and the cost of rebuilding from these damages. Will the area be able to absorb those costs? And will new buyers be able to take on that liability, knowing more presently than ever that this can happen? Many people are what we call grandfathered in. They bought these properties a long time ago, and now when they have to absorb the cost of real estate, rebuilding, homeowners insurance, these are costs that these people were not prepared to deal with, leads to many times homelessness. Now, St. Petersburg, in a lot of its backwaters, already has a lot of people living in boats. As much as a homeless population exists on land, it also sadly exists on water. And this hurricane will only agitate the homeless situation in St. Petersburg. Pretty much, even the waterways here have become homeless camps at this point, even before the hurricane. There was already an issue with St. Petersburg not having enough industry. It's again an older urban area with a lot of residential properties, meaning that most people that live in St. Petersburg have to travel into the Clearwater, Tampa, or even other parts of the metropolitan for work, since after all, there isn't any industry here other than tourism. Tourism has been susceptible to hurricanes, it has been susceptible to red tide, and of course, coronavirus. And the compounding effect of all these events means that St. Petersburg's economy has always been something hard to reach. As much as an oversaturation in local business investment in tourism means that if you do start a tourism-based company or some type of small business, the competition over time seems to be more than the actual number of clients that will enter your business, and oversaturation of the same types of businesses, a problem that manifests itself all over Florida, but is highlighted in St. Petersburg overall because of its geographical feature that it's surrounded by water, making commute times longer and things like industries a lot further away than what they would in other Florida cities. Structurally, an older city, it has created a larger volume of affordable housing and has brought in a younger crowd to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is different demographically than the rest of Florida in its politics, in its age, and demographics. St. Petersburg is a much more progressive and a much more younger crowd than much of Florida. And in that, it has somewhat better analytics than a lot of other places in categories like safety. It's really difficult to gauge how a city that is endemically different than the rest of Florida will be able to manage a situation like this, because again, St. Petersburg is kind of an oddball, different than the rest of the state. I believe for the next year or maybe even 2 years, the hurricane aftermath will make the beaches less attractive, will make living in this metropolitan area somewhat burdensome. And then you also have the contamination. Already the beaches of South St. Petersburg have had red tide, waves of animals dying along the coast. The beach literally stinks. It isn't going to be a place you'd want to go to with your family and enjoy, at least for the next year or two. And that's without the notion that red tide could prolong itself in this area beyond that point. It's just too early to know what the ecological damages are going to be to the beautiful yet delicate waterways surrounding this metropolitan area. Only time will tell how long these effects will take. So for now, if you're moving to St. Petersburg, you got to understand that for now, all that is kind of put on hold. But of course, this only affected the coastal areas. The vast majority of St. Petersburg was unaffected by hurricane storm surge, and the wind damages were minimal. So most of St. Petersburg is functioning the way it normally would. One of the downsides of the St. Petersburg area is that there are toll roads, it seems like just about in every direction you go. If you're heading south across the Skyway Bridge, there's a toll. So far, it's under $2, but hey, a lot of times these tolls keep going up and become ridiculous. There's also tolls if you're heading to the beaches. Parking at the beach isn't free. In other words, which I'm like 35, 40 minutes away from St. Petersburg, technically with traffic, it literally takes about an hour, but in theory, it should take 45 minutes. In other words, I go to the beaches in St. Petersburg quite often. I have to pay a toll to get across the Skyway Bridge. I have to pay another toll to the road that takes you to the beach. Then parking is $8 to $12. Paying about $20 in tolls to go to the beach is a little bit excessive. And I think that the tolls, parking fees in St. Petersburg definitely make it a less attractive option for people who are locals to go to the beaches. And it seems like in many other places in Florida, the private industries and tourism are trying to take away what should belong to the people of Florida. And it really feels that way with St. Petersburg. There's no nice way of saying that. Now, last time I went to St. Petersburg Beach to actually enjoy the beach before the hurricane, I had somebody try to steal my stuff at the beach. This was a group of people who we had a small little book bag. And the good thing is that I'm always careful to see exactly where I put my stuff. And I knew exactly where I left my stuff. But a larger group of people came and they put their stuff directly on top of our stuff to hide our stuff underneath their tent so they could eventually steal it. Now, I was able to catch onto it and I was able to get my stuff back through kind of an awkward encounter. But the point being that even if you're on the beaches, St. Petersburg may not have the most violent crime, but it does have a lot of petty crime. And again, great beaches, great vibes, but unfortunately, there's always a negative element to everything. And while St. Petersburg isn't the violent city that it once was, a lot of the people here still have a lot of hustle, a lot of finesse, a lot of scam, and crime, especially petty crime, is always an issue here. And like I said, the last time we were actually on the beach enjoying ourselves, all it did was take our eyes off our stuff for 2 seconds and somebody was trying to steal it. And I don't think it was some random isolated event. I really genuinely believe that here you always have to keep your eyes on your property. And there's my bag that almost got stolen. It was just a simple bag and somebody did try to make a move on it. Now, because of the urbanization of St. Petersburg being a built up area to begin with, it has become what's known as a contrast neighborhood or a contrast city. That means that the rich people and the poor people live literally across the street from each other. You know, it's an attractive area because of the beaches and the weather. So they've put a lot of new buildings and new construction literally right across from neighborhoods that are not the most desirable. And this is called a contrast city. And St. Petersburg is possibly one of the best examples in the country of a contrast city where the rich and the poor are literally right next to each other. And while for all social purposes, this is actually a good thing that promotes, people getting along, it's also difficult for crime and safety because, again, the rich people are always right next to the poor people. The notion of contrast neighborhoods are definitely off-putting to a lot of people, especially people who are paying a lot of money for real estate are usually going to be very far away from dangerous neighborhoods. In St. Petersburg, you're always in proximity to poor neighborhoods. Literally, your nice new house could be across the street from a bad neighborhood, or your corner store could literally be a neighborhood hangout spot. And that's something that a lot of people don't like about St. Petersburg, and it probably isn't going to change anytime soon. Alright, so for this part of the video, there's no politically correct way of going at this, so let's just do it raw. It is what it is. The south side of St. Petersburg is mostly black, and it is the hood, but it's very different than other hoods. It's got more money, it's got much more safety. I mean, it's still a hood for all the sakes of being a hood, but there's a few things that make the hood in St. Petersburg different. And probably one of the things that makes the hood in St. Petersburg different is the fact that the white population here is addicted at extraordinarily high disproportionate rates than anywhere else. Now, we don't know what the new overdose rates are for Pinellas County, but according to local law enforcement, they're telling me that it's higher than what it was before, and before was close to 67 per 100,000, so there's a lot of addiction here, and that has generated a lot of money for the hoods of St. Petersburg. If you want to live in a nicer area of St. Petersburg, you probably want to end up somewhere in the northeast side of the city. If you're anywhere near the southern half of the city, you're pretty much going to be in a contrast neighborhood. But even beyond that, it seems like bad neighborhoods are spread throughout the entirety of the city. And like I said, sometimes they're only right across the street from nicer areas. Near Coquina Key, you have some affluent black areas in the southern tip of the city on the water. And on the northeast side of the city, you got some affluent white areas. But in the center of the city, towards Pinellas Park, you have poor white areas. Here, there's a lot of registered offenders, and of course, addiction rates are insane. And that is kind of what feeds the city having more money, because unfortunately, many of the African Americans have resorted to dealing because, of course, lack of opportunities. And there's no nice way of saying this, but just at a glance, St. Petersburg, Bradenton, seems like African Americans here are just disproportionately more likely to end up in this line of work because of lack of opportunities. It isn't like that everywhere, but it certainly is the case here. And there's no politically correct way of saying that, but it is the truth. And don't get mad at me for saying it. I didn't create the circumstances that led to that. I'm just letting you know what the reality is on the ground. So if you're moving to St. Petersburg, you understand the package that it comes with. And unfortunately now, even if there are more options and opportunities and more just treatment of people by race, it's become a culture for some people, and it's endemically part of their fiber. This is just what they do, and it's a problem in this area. And again, St. Petersburg is safer than most large cities in Florida, and by far considerably safer than other cities. I'm talking about places like Atlanta have a homicide rate 3 times higher. Chattanooga, Knoxville, Louisville, Memphis, you can't compare none of those cities. I mean, St. Petersburg is by far safer than all of those cities, but you have this problem where the African American community here engages in a lot of this dealing activity because the white population is disproportionately more likely to be addicted. Why is the white population here so addicted? It could have a lot to do with perhaps the aging population. A lot of those people get a lot of medications. A lot of people in Florida get hurt. The business practices in Florida have gotten really shady. It's a state that doesn't care about its people. And, you could go endlessly on that topic, but a lot of the things that happen in Florida lead to people getting hurt, pedestrian accidents, workplace accidents. The state of Florida practically gives no craps about its people, and that leads to higher addiction indirectly. And, well, for some reason, Pinellas County seems to be the hub of that. Now, when you look at a race map of Pinellas County, you'll notice that Pinellas County is predominantly white there in blue, and then South St. Pete is black, and then Tampa seems to be a wide mix of people with a lot of Hispanics. You'll notice that in Pinellas County, the peninsula of Clearwater and St. Petersburg, it's probably the most white area of all of the Tampa Bay region. Now around Largo and Clearwater, there's starting to be pockets of orange, so Hispanics are slowly starting to move into Pinellas. With these hurricanes, there's going to be a lot more Hispanics moving along the coastline because they're the ones that do most of the construction work. And again, the rebuilding process along the coast could take years. So you can expect that Pinellas County will have an increase in the Hispanic population because of the hurricanes. That's normal in Florida. It's just the way things work. A lot of the people that are poor that are getting displaced along the coastline will be replaced with Hispanic populations. It already happened in Fort Myers, and its chances are it's going to happen here as well. And if you have mass deportations like we're expecting with 2025, you can expect Pinellas County to become even more Hispanic, as a lot of people from Tampa are going to have to relocate to Pinellas to subsidize the people that were working there that aren't there anymore. So it's going to turn Pinellas County into a lot more of a Hispanic or mixed area like the rest of the Tampa Bay area. So as of now, the demographics haven't changed in Clearwater, St. Petersburg too much, with the exception of a growth in Hispanics. But I think with the hurricanes and, of course, mass deportations, we're going to see the Hispanic population move closer to the coast. I was recently Uber driving in Pinellas County like all night long, and this is like before the start of the morning rush hour. And, despite the fact this area is like 10% Hispanic, if you go to a gas station in the morning, it's probably 80% Hispanic because all of the work crews are getting ready to work. So now, if you have a mass deportation of those people, which are mostly Mexicans, Hondurans, and Salvadorians, Cubans and Puerto Ricans from Tampa are going to buy property along the coast that needs to be rebuilt if it stays stagnant and they don't have enough workers, which with mass deportations, you can expect the rebuilding process to kind of slag. It's going to lag behind. It has to. If you get rid of the workers after a hurricane, it's going to take longer to rebuild, so they're going to have a definite demographical shift of people that are Hispanic buying up those properties just so they can be closer to work. So it's almost expected that there's going to be a huge demographical change in Pinellas County, which will mostly affect, I think, the northern and western edge of Pinellas County. Not so much the city limits of St. Petersburg, but definitely those coastal communities are going to have to see the demographical change, especially if you have mass deportations and especially with the hurricane cleanup efforts. It's not a surprise that despite the fact that Pinellas County has, like, I don't know, a very small percentage of people that are Hispanic, a large percentage of the hurricane cleanup is Hispanics. Probably 80 or 90% of the people working on hurricane cleanup are Hispanic. So with the hurricanes, you're already going to see that demographical change. And if there's raids, like I said, and immigration issues, it'll take even longer for the cleanup efforts, which means more people are going to have to relocate to Pinellas County, which are going to be of the Hispanic background. 6 or 8 years ago, you just wouldn't have seen that many Hispanics in Pinellas County. So there are some demographical changes happening within the county, not so much within the city limits of St. Petersburg, but just these are changes that are happening in the county in general. Now, the commute in and out of St. Petersburg isn't too bad for the most part. I think the only aggravation with the commute really is these tolls that you're going to have to get used to paying in all directions. And part of the issue, too, with the influx of Hispanics into coastal areas here is that the wealthy white population that's moving along the coast doesn't want black people working on their properties. Now, you've heard this whole thing on the news lately about black jobs or taking black jobs. No, these are not black jobs. These rich white people, they don't want black people on their properties. They want Hispanics because of it. They trust it more. And these are the types of people that are buying affluent properties along the coast. And you just aren't going to see this influx of black people getting these jobs after hurricanes. That's not the way it works. And again, don't be mad at me for stating truth. I'm just telling you the way things really are. I know a lot of times people, when they hear me say these things, it hurts them. My intention isn't to hurt your feelings, but it's just to tell you the raw deal how it is. And that's the way it is. The rich white people that buy these houses along the coast, they don't want black people working. And it perpetually gives you that situation that I just explained where the black people can't get enough jobs and opportunities. Hispanics are now working in construction doing the hurricane cleanup. They're probably going to leave with this hurricane, which means that other Hispanics from Tampa that are legal, like Cubans and Puerto Ricans, and other Hispanics that are legal within Tampa, are going to come up to St. Petersburg, buy up a lot of these properties, fix them. It's a huge thing for people that work in construction to buy a property that they can fix themselves. And thus, that demographical change that has happened in Southwest Florida already further down the coast will likely happen here, bringing a lot more Hispanics closer to the water because of the hurricane. For young people, nightlife in downtown St. Pete is a blast. By landscape, it is one of the largest downtowns in Florida, if not the largest. Now, St. Pete is one of the few blue counties in Florida, Pinellas County, right? So lots of nightlife, lots of events, lots of young people. If you're a student, a young couple, you may enjoy St. Petersburg more. They have a lot of events. They have a large downtown. So sports bars, nightlife. If you're young, there's a lot to do in St. Petersburg. And, even if you're older, there's still great vibes. It's just a really nice place to be during the wintertime where downtown gets packed and people are trying to get away from the cold weather. There really are some great downtown vibes, and it definitely feels safe compared to other large cities across the country. So if you want to enjoy a really nice vibe, a place where you can go out, get a drink, be in downtown late at night, feel completely safe, that is what St. Petersburg has become. And again, it wasn't always like that, but that's the way it is now. And I'm pretty sure now, with a lot of destruction along the coastline, a lot of people that snowboard are going to pack downtown St. Petersburg. So there'll be even more people, more activities, and more events going on in downtown St. Petersburg. So if you're a young couple, a young person, you'll probably enjoy this aspect of St. Petersburg a lot. It really has a good vibe, and it has a lot of things going on. Now, for being in Florida, there really isn't a lot of good Mexican food in St. Pete. You can see right in this little area in the northwest side of the city, there's a few Mexican restaurants in there. There's a lot of hipster Mexican places, like kind of more Americanized Mexican food, but authentic Mexican food, you're just not going to find too much of it in St. Petersburg. It's really not their strength. And while there are Cuban restaurants scattered throughout St. Petersburg, none of them are specifically great. Now I know the locals are gonna get mad at me for saying that because they think that it's good Cuban food, but it's not. It's not a Tampa. It's not a Miami. Crap. It's not even a Naples or Fort Myers. St. Pete really doesn't have good Cuban food. It falls behind even further than Jacksonville when it comes to Cuban food. It really doesn't have a lot of good Latin food. And that's kind of a bummer for a lot of people. A lot of people, when they move to Florida, they just assume that their city is going to have good Cuban food. But in the case of St. Petersburg, there's a long way to go there. But what it does have is good Greek food. If you're a fan of Greek food and Mediterranean food in general, but particularly Greek food, you'll love St. Petersburg and most of Pinellas County. And within a short drive, you can be all the way up in Tarpon Springs, and your options are endless. So if you do like this type of cuisine, you're going to be all right. There's a few other Mediterranean restaurants as well that are pretty good. So at least it's got that going for it when it comes to food. Now, when you have a lot of yuppies, we could call them, and hipsters, you end up with a situation where your food scene sucks, kind of like with Austin, Texas. And St. Petersburg has the same problem. This demographic really isn't that versed on dining. They kind of will eat garbage practically, so that doesn't really create an awesome environment for dining. And then you have a lot of tourists in St. Petersburg, and as we know, the tourists, they come and go, so there's no reason for restaurants to be that impressive, and all that contributes to St. Petersburg just not having great food. One of the local food scenes among the people in St. Petersburg is the local seafood scene. May be a surprise to some of you guys, but the seafood scene is mostly on the south side of the city in the African American neighborhoods. I don't know if you know this about Florida, but whether you're in St. Petersburg particularly, or Fort Myers, or just any South Florida city, or even Central Florida, African Americans are big on seafood here, and it's kind of like a fried seafood scene. It's not exactly salmon, it's mostly fried fish, lots of shrimp, lots of burgers go along with that, chicken burgers. It's a lot of what we call hood drive-through spots. So, you got the hooks, you got snappers down in Broward County. You got a lot of that seafood scene in the African-American area, so St. Petersburg. Lots of crab as well. It's huge in St. Petersburg. It's huge in Broward as well. It's kind of like a Florida thing, It's a hood drive-through at night type of place. A lot of these places are open until 3 or 4 in the morning. You get out of the club and you go get some seafood, some shrimp, some burgers, some milkshakes also go along with that pretty well. So it's kind of like a little thing we got going on here in Florida. Most people aren't really into that scene. They don't even know about it. But even here in Bradenton, we have like Sam's, and Fort Myers, you got hooks, and Broward, you got snappers. So it's kind of a Florida thing. Even small towns like Williston in the East Williston up there, little town up there in the middle of nowhere in Florida, they have a seafood festival in the African-American neighborhood. So it's kind of African-American seafood culture. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but it's an interesting scene. It's definitely not a healthy food scene, but it's good enough that it's killing me slowly because I can't get enough of it. Here in Bradenton, we have Sam's Seafood and Grill. They're amazing. And, well, in St. Petersburg, there's a huge scene of seafood in the hood, and I definitely recommend it. So this food scene in St. Petersburg, it ain't the Mexican food, it ain't the Cuban food. It's kind of their own little Greek food thing and their seafood thing. It's kind of like a regional thing they got going on. And those are usually the best types of food anyways. I think St. Petersburg is kind of crippled when it comes to dining options. Overall, St. Petersburg really is a great city. My favorite part of the city is the northeast corner. I feel like there you got more like mom and pop places, just kind of nicer, quieter neighborhoods. It feels a lot smaller than what St. Pete really is. So that's my favorite part of the city, the northeast side. I like the types of restaurants they got. Like I remember here, I walked into a restaurant and it was just like a lot of elderly people, and you can tell like there are people that have kind of grown up in Florida their whole lives. So it kind of like it's a city vibe, but it has a little bit of a country flair to it. I don't know how to describe it. I think St. Petersburg is a great city, and don't let the notion of a lot of young people scare you if you're older. A lot of the people that are older that live in St. Petersburg absolutely love it. The downtown's been growing. The downtown has now a lot of nice high-rise buildings. There's even more going in. It seems like there's a lot of great infrastructure investment going into St. Petersburg. Population density will continue to grow in St. Petersburg as it gets bigger. There's really nowhere for the city to grow except up. And that's really the next stage of St. Petersburg growth is up. There's nowhere else for the city to grow because of its weather, mild climate during the winter, great beaches. I think St. Petersburg will continue to grow. Safety is really what's at the core of the growth in St. Petersburg. Now, the city has a massive visible homeless population, and Pinellas County as a whole, really, not just St. Petersburg. And unfortunately, of course, the other problem we talked about where a lot of people here, and that leads to homelessness as well, are hooked. So all that, is holding back this area in a lot of ways. No place is perfect. It's going to have its problems, but without a doubt, the fact that compared to other large American cities, it's considerably safer. A lot of people are going to want to be in a warm, safe city with lots of things to do. I think in the future, St. Petersburg is going to be more diverse. It's going to be safer, hopefully, and it's going to be probably more expensive. But what we'll continue to struggle with is the lack of industries that are not related to tourism. Now, the young people here are very self-sufficient and able to find employment and get crafty about finding a way to make a living. I can't tell you how many of my peers from Southwest Florida that were young moved up to the Tampa or St. Petersburg area looking for affordable living, a larger city, and of course better opportunities that don't exist in smaller places. And I think that's going to continue to happen, making St. Petersburg a place where a lot of people keep moving to, growing, and prospering. I would say that even I would move here. I've considered moving to St. Petersburg. If the right opportunity came along, I wouldn't mind living in St. Petersburg today. Probably wouldn't say the same thing about Tampa, but I would say it for St. Petersburg. It just seems like it's got a good vibe. It's got a lot of charm. A lot of the older neighborhoods are beautiful and charming. But, there's a problem here endemically with the city that it hasn't been able to fix. And it's just kind of the marginalization of the African-American community. When I Uber drive in St. Petersburg, I've noticed that the black people here are very apprehensive. It's like, I don't know what other white people have been doing to them that have turned them that way, or if it's them, or if it's the way they've been treated. But when I Uber drive here, I've noticed it, that like the way, your black people act around you are just kind of really to themselves. They don't want to talk as much. They feel kind of cornered. And I don't know if it's because the way they've been treated. I don't have that problem everywhere, but I definitely have that problem in St. Petersburg. I've just noticed that the people here just kind of don't stick together very well. They're very apprehensive about each other, and I don't really know what that's about, but it always feels awkward, when like I'm overdriving, I'll get a passenger, I'll say, hey, what's up, how's your day going, this and that, and they just kind of sit there and don't talk. And really, now that I think about it, it isn't just that, it's also a lot of the people here in general, the yuppies. They have this kind of to themselves culture. They're not good, they're untrustworthy, or they're just not interested in socializing. And I can say that I've overdriven quite a bit in St. Petersburg, and it never really seems like the people are enjoyable to deal with unless they're tourists. It seems like the locals are just shell-shocked, they're apprehensive, they're untrustworthy, or they don't want to socialize. And I do the Uber driving not so much for the money, but because I like to meet people and experience different people in different places. And it really hasn't been fun in St. Petersburg. You just get these individuals that don't talk at all. They just sit there staring blankly ahead. It's kind of a yuppie culture. And at times, it's almost snotty and disrespectful. It's almost like they don't really acknowledge you as a human practically. So I feel like the yuppie culture and how people treat each other here is very, I don't like it. I recently Uber drove in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville was more like a redneck city, and there, black or white, everybody was dope. They would start conversations, you could blast music they like, and it's just a totally different vibe when I Uber drove in Jacksonville. The people were more interactive, You could play some music, you could have some good conversation, you could have a laugh. It was just a better vibe of like socialization between people. And keep in mind that I'm in Hispanic, I'm in Jacksonville, it's a black and white city predominantly. It's just like St. Petersburg, but it's a very different culturally than St. Petersburg. I don't know what makes the people here so much different or apprehensive. We know that, this area here it votes blue, which most of Florida doesn't. So you have a younger, more yuppie crowd, which I don't mind that at all. I actually like that. If you've heard my videos, sometimes one of the things that sucks the most about Florida is how it's all old people. But at the end of the day, there is somewhat of a social impairment with the people here where they just struggle to be normal. Like if I get a passenger, I'm Uber driving, I'm like, yo, what's up? How's your day going? This and that. Like, I'm trying to kick it. I'm trying to see what's good. I'm trying to vibe. I'm trying to connect. And the people are just like, they put up a wall. And I don't know what about St. Petersburg makes the people like that. Could be the yuppie culture. So I'll tell you one experience that I had in St. Petersburg. Now, this lady was clearly not U.S. born, foreign born. Couldn't decipher where. Maybe Russian, Serbian, Bosnian. I couldn't tell. Maybe Eastern European. The accent was heavy. I mean heavy. Everything on this person screamed maybe Eastern European. And I couldn't crack the shell with this lady. I was like, hey, I was born in Cuba. We eat bananas and listen to music loudly and play the bongos, I'm listening to Gente de Zona right now or something. Let's play some salsa music here. There's nothing to hide here. But I think what's happening in St. Pete, too, is that probably what's happening in Sarasota, that among this yuppie affluent crowd, you have a lot of Europeans that are illegal. Now, most people aren't on this. A lot of emphasis on illegal Hispanics. There's a lot of illegal white Europeans. And these are the types of people that they don't even like to talk about what country they're from. They like to, I was born in America. I'm like, really? It doesn't sound like it. But you have a lot of these individuals that I've noticed that in St. Petersburg, they're not comfortable being Russian or Ukrainian or whatever they are. They have to be like, I was born here. I'm like, yeah, you think? Hard to tell, eh? Like, no, you're obviously not born here. You're uncomfortable talking about where you're from. And that's a red flag. I'm not sure. But like I said, I've Uber driving in St. Petersburg quite a bit. And the interactions with people just have left me scratching my head. I haven't been able to connect with people in St. Petersburg. I think it has a lot to do with the yuppie young culture. And I've dealt with people that are kind of snobby as well. So I can say that I've Uber driven here enough to get a feel for the people, and it's definitely been kind of disappointing. It's not like when I did Uber driving in Jacksonville where I was like, wow, cool people, good stories, Here it's like, oh, we're not the same race, so there's a wall or something. It's been kind of weird working in St. Petersburg. I do feel like the people here have put up walls in unnecessary places, making social interactions kind of awkward. And I think if you move here, you're probably going to realize that it isn't like other parts of Florida where people are more open and more sociable. People here kind of do put up a wall, kind of like a Seattle freeze or a Miami attitude. You get a little bit of that here. And that is probably one of the negative things about living in the St. Petersburg area. Is everybody you meet like that? Absolutely not. The only thing more depressing than some of the people's social interactions really is the fact that the beaches here are going to take a long time to recover. And it hurts me dearly because I'm only 35 minutes away from the bridge. In theory, if there's no traffic, I could be on the beach in 45 minutes in St. Petersburg Beach. Most likely an hour, like I said, but that hurts. It's not that far away. I moved to this area to enjoy these places, and right now it's going to be quite a bit. It's not a city of jobs and opportunities, and don't think for a second that it will. Out of the few conversations I could grab from people here are just barely getting by. And while this hurricane was bad, it isn't the worst case scenario. The day that a worst case scenario does happen to St. Petersburg, it will be almost unimaginable how bad things could get. Now, on this particular day when I was doing this damage, you could see that the cops were flying a drone over me, and they were following me around with a drone. And there was an African-American rapper by the name of Nino Breeze. And on the day that I filmed this video, Nino Breeze was actually in this part of St. Petersburg. We actually saw his vehicle, and he actually got arrested for loitering. So he was on probation for a previous charge, and being on probation, he doesn't have rights. So when they detained him, they were able to search him, and it turns out that they arrested him for loitering, which is practically what we call in Florida a homeless charge. In other words, it seems like because he was a rapper and black that he couldn't go to the coast and look at the destruction. He got arrested for loitering, and he was on probation trying to get his life together, and they've put him away for a while now with this one. They ruined the guy's life practically. And it seems like a lot of the African American people in St. Petersburg feel uncomfortable because of situations like that, where, you know, they feel like along these white coastal areas that are 98% white, you know, if you're black, you can't go hang out over there. But the reason you live in St. Petersburg is to go to the beaches. But there seems like there's still a lot of tensions here within these communities. And the example of Nino Breeze is a good example, or a bad example, better yet, that you can just be minding your own business, doing what everybody else is doing, but be singled out for your race. Why are you in this area? You can see that when I was recording the video, law enforcement even had a drone following me around. So like the rich, wealthy people here, they're very, again, the same word, apprehensive of outsiders. They just don't like to see people that don't live in their communities. They're always feeling like people are after them because they're wealthy and live close to poor neighborhoods. So that plays a little bit into this area's vibe, unfortunately. You do have like a crust of wealthy elites along the coast who feel that they're better than everybody else, even though they only live practically across the street. So me recording my YouTube video, the cops were flying a drone over my head. This individual person here was collecting scrap metal, and they brought 5 police cops out just to handle this guy for collecting scrap metal, which the people, they're throwing stuff away, it's garbage. But they brought 5 police cars for this guy picking up scrap metal. So just on this particular day, this guy here, they gave him a hard time for picking up scrap metal. They eventually gave him tickets and made him bring a tow truck to take the trailer away because they said it wasn't safe for his vehicle. The guy was just collecting scrap metal, okay? He was just trying to make an honest living. Nino Breeze was out there trying to have a good time, and I was out there trying to record some YouTube videos. The point is that along the wealthy coast of St. Petersburg's beaches, if you're Hispanic, poor, black, if you don't match that rich white profile that they want, law enforcement targets you. And I talked to the police officers, and they were nice people. I don't think they were malignant individuals. We actually had a great conversation. But endemically, this area has the problem where if you're poor or a minority and you find yourself in the wealthy areas, you're always being singled out and profiled. But, you know, all the while, law enforcement's busy with Hispanics and blacks and anybody who doesn't look like they're rich. The white population is disproportionately dying from overdoses at a rate about 3 times higher than everybody else. So you have a problem where the white population is able to just run rampant with all types of illicit activities. Nobody checks them. They're passing out left and right, dying from overdoses. But then they have the time to go after blacks and Hispanics or poor people who look like they're out of place in wealthy areas. So police profiling really is a huge issue in this area. And these are just some of the problems that this area faces. You really have outright police profiling of not just blacks or Hispanics, but anybody who looks poor or out of place. And on this particular day where I was filming, it was obvious that, you know, there was a lot of people here enjoying themselves or doing different activities, but law enforcement was drawn to the guy with the scrap metal trailer, drawn to the YouTuber with a camera, drawn to the black guy in a Mercedes-Benz or whatever. So it seems like it's a persistent problem here. And again, that also creates the culture among the African Americans where it's like, well, if you're not going to give us the same opportunities, if we can't go for a walk along the beach and be treated like everybody else, it leads people to other avenues. And it creates a culture among those communities that is detrimental to them and to other people in society. But again, it doesn't start off endemically with that community. It starts with the way you treat them. So that's the St. Petersburg area. And I think now if there's an influx of Hispanics, it's going to make things even more tense because now you have this whole black jobs thing going around where they're taking black jobs, but it's not really the case. It's not that the Hispanics are taking the jobs. It's that the whites don't want to give it to them. In the case of this area here, you have illegals working. 90% of the people working in all these buildings are illegals, or Guatemalans or Mexican Hondurans. And law enforcement looks the other way on them because they're simply working for the rich people. They couldn't be there enjoying the beaches, but because they're there working, they look the other way. But a U.S. citizen who's black, poor, picking up scrap metal draws law enforcement attention. And again, it's not the police, it's not the people, it's the wealthy people who want it that way. They pay a lot of taxes, and they want law enforcement to go after and profile anybody that is unsightly in their neighborhood. But I guess for their neighborhood to not be unsightly requires a crap load of illegals. So All these are demographical changes that are happening in St. Petersburg area. Overall, it's a great city that's going through some changes, and it'll be interesting to see how these changes are going to affect the area. Overall, I definitely recommend it though.